Joining me now is Dr. Heather Yates. She is an assistant professor of American history, political science at the University of Central Arkansas. Dr. Yates, Heather, thank you for being with us.
Hi, good to be here.
Let's talk about what we have watched at the federal level this week. We saw Congress take away some of the committee powers of Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene. We see next week we're going to have this impeachment vote in the Senate, the trial at least. Right now, I think the biggest question to me is in American politics, you have this huge fissure in the GOP. You've got this Matt Gaetz wing of the party versus this traditional kind of French Hill wing of the party right here. How do these two stay in compatibility, stay in some sort of balance? Is it inevitable that something's going to break?
It looks like the party is heading that direction because there seems to be very few points of reconciliation between what that moderate sector of the party and the more radicalized of recent wing of the party. And so at this point in time, there's going to be some real electoral consequences if the Republicans cannot find areas of policy or even ideology for this point matter where they can unite and create a united front for the electoral landscape. But at this point in time, there is just too much conflict, and it is an intensifying intra-party conflict. And history tells us that when this occurs inside of a party, that there is inevitable split. And so then the question becomes is which faction of the party splits off, and do they join another party, or do they break off and try a run at a third party?
And we've seen former President Trump talk about the fact that he might form a patriot party, I think is what he described it. It seems to have tamped down a little bit, but that may be the option out there for that further right wing of the party. Would you agree?
So I think that would be an organic point of action, organic path that the Trump wing of the party, so to speak, would break off and make a go at the Patriot Party. And so that kind of holds about a third of the party base, the GOP. So that would leave 2/3 of the GOP maybe intact to try to rebuild. But that right now seems to be an organic evolution. Whether it is successful or not remains to be seen. But and we'll see if Trump resurrects that call to create the Patriot Party, especially ahead of 2022.
Yeah, may play out on how that vote goes on that trial in the Senate next
Very
week.
true. Very true. Yeah. He's toned down that rhetoric.
Do we see some of that same pressure in the Democratic Party? You do have a more liberal wing of the Democratic Party versus a more moderate wing of the Democratic Party. It seems to be under control right now to some extent because Joe Biden is president and he's a moderate.
So the Democratic Party, you're exactly right, has also been suffering some of these intra-party factions and these fissures between the more moderate sector of the Democrats and then the more left of center progressives. And right now, there is communication between the two factions, and communication meaning that, Biden pulled Bernie Sanders and his supporters into the fold during the campaign. So he's opened up access of communication to influence policy platforms. The progressives would like to see him go further to the left, but right now Biden is attempting to temper that section of the party by pulling them into the negotiations and letting them or inviting them actually to have influence on public policy. That is tempering at least or quelling the agitation inside of the party. And what we see is at least holding together. So it's hopefully for the Democrats going to prevent defections, which is the whole strategy of pulling them into the fold and negotiating and having them have influence on policy.
Let's pull it back to Arkansas. We've got a heated governor's race already with 3 Republican announced candidates in the race. Sarah Huckabee Sanders, the presumptive favorite at this point in time. But Lieutenant Governor Tim Griffin, a hard campaigner, certainly not dropping out or giving any indication of that. Attorney General Leslie Rutledge indicating she's in it to win it as well. I guess, how do you kind of see back to what we were talking about with these factions in the party? Is there a uniter of that Does it open a door for a potential independent candidate like a Jim Hendren or a Davy Carter, who's talking about maybe not running from the Republican Party, but more moderate centrist as an independent? What do you see happening there?
So the Republican Party in Arkansas is a really compelling case study because with Sarah Sanders and Leslie Rutledge, particularly in the race, they both have encompassed and really embraced Trump ideology, the Trump vision of the Republican Party. Tim Griffin is sort of, the more middle ground of the three candidates here. And what's fascinating about the GOP ideology and just the status of the GOP in Arkansas is under the Trump administration, Arkansas was one of the few Republican states that actually shifted and intensified more Republican under Trump, whereas a lot of the other Southern states who elected Trump in 2016 shifted toward the Democratic Party under Trump on the ground level. So this is an interesting case study for Trumpism after Trump, especially with Sarah Sanders and Leslie Rutledge. Because early on, under Trump's administration, Leslie Rutledge was also positioning herself as a very pro-Trump advocate. And even after the election, she stepped out as a pro-Trump advocate as he was contesting the election protocols and the election results. So I think for Arkansas and the Republican Party, this is really a party unified around the Trump ideology. And so that I don't think we're going to see the fissures in the Republican Party in the gubernatorial race that we're seeing play out nationally.
And that could be not helpful to an independent candidate that might want to offer something a little bit more in the center. If you're not going to pull enough of that Republican vote over, Democrats do have to stay somewhat united behind a candidate so that they can get their 3% to maintain their political party status. So it's just not a layup that all of the Democrats would move over to one side.
That's right. To your point about the possibility of a third party or a third way candidate, the unity of the GOP and the intensification of the GOP around the Trump ideology really acts to block, okay, the access of a third way candidate in terms of not blocking them from competing, but blocking them from actually waging a viable competitive run at the governorship.
Let's talk about what we're seeing at the state legislature. I kind of made a few notes here to just kind of talk about some of the bigger political issues that are being debated early on. I mean, we're almost a month into this session. It involves social justice, education, abortion, guns. These are hardly the bread and butter issues of lower taxes and smaller government and more local control that we've typically seen as part of the Republican mantra. Does it surprise you that we're moving so quickly or in such a big way on some of these social issues?
It does not surprise me that we've seen these kind of bills be drafted and introduced into committee, particularly on education, social justice issues, the continuation of legislation placing more constraints on access or the protocols to reproductive health issues, and most definitely on Second Amendment issues, as this is always at the forefront of not daily, but at least discourse in Arkansas about Second Amendment issues, personal liberty rights. So it does not surprise me that we see more of the ideological issues being manifested into legislation rather than what you call the bread and butter issues, the economic issues, education, jobs and whatnot.
We got some fun times ahead of us, Heather, some fun times ahead of us with all these elections, and we still got 2/3 of a legislature to go too. So
No
I mean, it's
doubt.
a lot of fun. Dr. Heather Yates with the University of Central Arkansas, thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it.
Thanks so much.